Welcome to The Counselor, Beyond Conventional Defense.
Hello and welcome to Counselor Beyond Conventional Defense, the podcast that challenges the traditional approach to criminal defense and takes a deeper look at how the justice system can evolve. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today I am joined by attorney William V. Pernick, a trailblazer in criminal defense whose approach is anything but conventional. Attorney Pernick has built a reputation for focusing not on punishment, but on rehabilitation. His unique approach recognizes that true justice isn't found in locking people up, but in helping them heal and grow and reintegrate into society. With years of experience, he's helped countless clients break the cycle of incarceration, advocating for treatment over punishment at every step of the way. And in today's episode, this is part 2 of our conversation with Adina. She has a really powerful story to kind of further explore the challenges of advocating for treatment as a primary solution for criminal behavior. William, great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So your approach to criminal defense, you have a different approach. You're focusing on understanding the reasons behind criminal behavior and solutions on what to do for the defendant to help avoid recidivism. So, can you kind of explain your mindset, the way that it shapes the way you handle these cases?
Absolutely. I think the power of the approach that we have developed here at the firm is the power behind asking the question why. We challenge traditional understanding of why a person is in custody. We challenge the traditional notion that crime is a direct consequence of choices that people make, because when our judges, when our prosecutors believe that crimes are committed by those who choose to commit them, that usually results in much harsher punishment. From my perspective, there is usually a much better understanding of why these things happen. We know that 50 to 75% of all cases in criminal justice system have some form of mental health or substance abuse issue behind them. I strive to understand true reasons why a person is seeking my assistance, why a person is facing criminal charges. And even when that person is innocent, oftentimes there are things that are happening in that person's life that result in them being accused of the crime. And so I look for an opportunity to find things that can be mended, find things that are broken, that can be repaired, so that a person could move forward with life in a much better way after being healed.
It's sort of like the idea of rehabilitation rather than just punishment.
But much more powerfully so in California, because we now have unique opportunities to not only provide treatment, which has been available for some time, but actually incentivize people to participate in appropriate treatment under court supervision for a lengthy period of time and get their entire criminal cases dismissed, which is a very powerful incentive.
And once you've identified the root cause of the criminal behavior, how do you collaborate with therapists or other specialists to help address these issues?
I identify the type of an expert that I will need based on whether this is a mental health issue, whether this is a substance abuse issue. Oftentimes, and one of our guests today is a really great example of that, but oftentimes you will see a person who appears to suffer primarily from a substance use issue, which in the past have been treated. Person has received chances, none of them worked. So what I do differently is I look beyond that to see what is causing the person to be using substances. Why is the person so badly addicted? And that oftentimes reveals a much more profound mental health issue. And once you address that, you see completely different success rates. And then once we identified the right type of an expert, be it a marriage and family therapist, a substance abuse counselor, perhaps a psychologist, or really an expert in any one of the many fields that could come into play depending on the circumstances of the case. If we're dealing with a child abuse, child endangerment case, perhaps this is an issue with somebody who needs to receive instruction on proper parenting. In a domestic violence context, we need to perhaps have a couples counselor. Whatever the case is, almost always you can find an explanation if you ask the question why often enough, strongly enough, and persistently enough. And that's what we do.
It's interesting balancing that legal defense with the mental health or behavior aspects of a case. What does that holistic approach look like in practice?
I think, first of all, we have to remember that our job is to defend the individual. We have specific legal and ethical obligations. We obviously have to challenge illegal behavior by government agents, unlawful stops, unlawful seizures, illegal actions by police, prosecutorial misconduct. And when a person is factually innocent, we raise those issues. But that doesn't mean that we have to be blind to other problems that our clients oftentimes have. When I'm dealing with a case where somebody is, let's say, a 15-year-old crack addict who was caught smoking crack in a car, illegally searched, illegally found to be perhaps in possession of the drugs, yes, I can bring a motion that likely will get the case dismissed. But while the case is pending, while we're preparing the motion, since we don't know if the motion is going to be granted or denied, there is no reason why I shouldn't also be having conversations with my young client, with my client's family to say, look, I understand the police officers were wrong in doing what they did. There is no reason why you should be sitting in a car smoking crack cocaine. Some things are not working out in your life. Let's make sure you get some help so that when you do come to court, when you do come for a motion hearing, the judge will see you for the person that you really are and not just the person that these facts and these police reports portray you as. And so that leads to much better success in court, even when I'm using conventional litigation approaches like filing motions, but it also allows me an opportunity oftentimes to benefit from alternatives to criminal prosecution, like a variety of diversion type programs. And even if we're not successful in getting somebody into diversion per se, by the time the person comes for sentencing, they are a completely different individual. They have been transformed. Repair process, the healing process has begun. And that means that for sure it's going to be taken into account when the person is doing the sentencing. I want to give you an example from something that happened this week. I had a client who was looking at a state prison sentence for almost 3 years, during which her case was pending. She was clearly guilty of smuggling a very large amount of drugs into a state prison. No one wanted to give this woman an opportunity for felony probation. But something that we did differently is we started asking the question, why? We didn't just assume that this person is guilty. She clearly got caught with a lot of drugs. And as a result, we need to negotiate the best possible deal for the lowest amount of time in prison, since we don't have a real defense to it, since she got caught red-handed. Instead, we hired someone to evaluate. We had her connect with treatment providers, and we learned that this young lady went through an unbelievable amount of abuse as a child, unbelievable amount of trauma, that she was manipulated, conditioned to bring those drugs by a significant other who was incarcerated in prison. We learned from this that there are things in her background that made her act a certain way. And we connected her with treatment providers, and she has done so well in treatment. She has internalized it fully, and she has agreed to stay in treatment regardless of what ultimately happens in her case. So by the time we came back for sentencing, everyone saw her as a completely different person. And that was accurate because she changed. This approach changed who she was. She was holding a permanent job. She was receiving rave reviews from everybody around her. She was sober. She was cognizant of boundaries that she needs to maintain in her life. And the outcome of her case showed it. Instead of going to prison, she got an opportunity on probation. And that's what we want to do.
That's a remarkable story. And that's a great segue into another remarkable story. Our special guest, Adina, who you worked with. Adina, we'd love to have you join us and bring you into the conversation.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here, Adina. I really appreciate it.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm really happy to see you as always. Always happy to hear your voice. And I am just really delighted that you and I keep talking and keep meeting under completely different circumstances.
Absolutely. It's still sometimes a little bit unreal to me. And when I think about the circumstances under which we met.
So, Kevin, you did not have a chance to join us in the conversation last time, but when Adina and I first met, it was just about a week and a half after Thanksgiving, a few weeks before the holidays. I met Adina in Monterey County Jail. She was in really rough shape. She has been in isolation because this was during COVID era. She was super, super, super skinny because she was on the street using drugs. She has been suffering from an unbelievable amount of trauma based on the childhood experiences and young adulthood experiences that she had. Everyone has pretty much given up on her. She had a fairly minor felony case and a huge problem that was going to probably cost her the rest of her life. And that's the circumstances under which we met.
Yeah, I suppose this is a lot different then, huh?
She has been doing an unbelievable job paying it forward. Adina is now a manager in a sober living facility, the one where she ultimately landed on the East Coast after a number of efforts in recovery. She's helping a lot of other young women overcome their struggles. She's a sponsor for other folks in recovery, and frankly, a survivor of a lot of really horrific stuff that happened to her. One of the most resilient people I've ever met, and I'm really thrilled to no longer call her my client. And I told her the other day when we were talking, I'm just really glad to think of her as just a friend.
Well, that's really cool that you were able to help her, William, and Adina. It's really great that you had the drive to get better and to turn your life around like this. I know you talked about your story in the previous episode, but for anyone who maybe didn't catch that, could you just give us a quick version of how you kind of ended up becoming an addict?
Absolutely. The very abbreviated version is I was raised in a very religious family. There was a lot of different kinds of abuse that I experienced and a lot of trauma just based on the way that I am. Like, for some people, that approach of extreme religion works, but for me, it didn't, and different things affected me very strongly. I started using drugs when I was 13. I was acting out. I got sent away to, it was supposedly a high school, but it wasn't actually a high school. It was a religious institution that promised parents they'd get their children back for them, and you were allowed to use drugs there at the time. And I just got deeper and deeper into it. Finally, I happened upon opiates, and that's where I discovered my drug of choice. Heroin turned into fentanyl. When fentanyl came out, I also definitely was addicted to crack cocaine. At about 18, I made my way to California, and up until I met William, I was pretty much in and out of jails and treatments and on the street, and that's in a nutshell.
Now, Kevin, you said something a little bit earlier. I think earlier you mentioned that it was really cool that I was able to help Adina. But I think that statement or question really misses a large point. And that is that it's actually Adina who is helping me in many ways. During the pendency of the case, obviously, I was inspired by the challenge, and boy, she certainly gave me a professional and personal challenge. To her credit, she's got a killer sense of humor. We have a saying in the defense world that you don't have to like your client to do a good job, but it helps. And despite Adina being so resistant to treatment and having so many issues, and obviously needing a lot of help and a lot of time, she was an extraordinarily sympathetic client and person, and I felt so bad for everything that she had to overcome. So it was inspiring, and it was a challenge, and I like a good challenge. But what is really awesome about us being able to have this conversation is that Adina is helping me understand legal proceedings involving folks with mental health or substance abuse issues from the perspective of the client. And so I have discovered from just talking to her that there is a huge disconnect between how we see what's happening to a person in the courtroom or read about it on a police report or mental health evaluation we get from one of our experts. But when you actually have a conversation with her and you listen to how she perceived the same exact proceedings and court events, but from her uniquely personal viewpoint, that's what's remarkable to me. It's eye-opening, it's incredibly educational, and I think that a lot of professionals, legal professionals, should try to understand things from their client's perspective, because otherwise we feel super frustrated. We feel like just washing our hands off of someone who told us for the 20th time they don't want to be helped, they just want to get out. And so I think it's super important to understand what our clients are going through. And that's why I'm so grateful to have Adina here to help me do my job better, to help me share with other people how to do this job better.
That's really cool, William, that she's helped you as much as you've helped her. I noticed when you said that, she kind of smiled. I don't know if maybe she doesn't agree with you on that, but either way. So tell me, talk about the approach. Like, how was this approach different, and you know, how the approach was different and how the results were different?
I think in Adina's specific case, we had a lot of challenges, and Adina had a really bad track record. But I think part of the reason for it is that she was not properly understood as an individual. So when Adina's parents contacted me for the first time, what I have heard from them was very similar to what I hear from parents whose children have substance abuse issues, which is, oh my goodness, Mr. Perning, our son, our daughter has been using drugs for all this time. We're such wonderful parents. We really love this child. We have done everything we could, but no matter what we do, the drugs, the friends, the pull is so strong. There's just nothing we can do to change it. And Adina's parents, it wasn't quite 100% like that. They loved her very, very much. They obviously were very concerned. But usually when I deal with clients who have substance abuse issues, that's the perspective from family members I get when I first get contacted. Adina has been in rehabs a lot. She has been perceived as a failure by other lawyer who represented her in Los Angeles County before me. I have received emails and phone calls where I was told there's nothing you can do. She's just going to get out and, use again. And so for me, what was important is to understand why. And so what we did differently with Adina, it was clear that this young lady needed help with really bad addiction she had, in particular towards fentanyl. However, what I felt was lacking in the past is understanding why the addiction started. And that's when we started looking at the history of trauma, which is what made me feel so strongly about Adina's case, and Adina in particular. We hired a really excellent forensic psychologist. These are experts who specialize in doing evaluations for courts. They don't do treatment, although they will lay out parameters of a treatment plan, but they basically act as diagnosticians. They diagnose the problem, they give us an expert analysis, and oftentimes it's the only opportunity a person may have had in their entire life to have a really great PhD clinical psychologist actually study their life and their case for 8, 10, 12 hours and then prepare a comprehensive summary. So that's exactly what we did in this case. I asked the family to assist us to fund a comprehensive mental health evaluation. We send it to an expert that I love and trust and worked with for many years, who has helped a lot of my clients identify root causes of their behavior. And what we learned here is that drug use, as I suspected, although it was no doubt severe, it was actually secondary to the mental health issues that my client had due to profound physical and sexual abuse that she suffered as a young person and as a child. And because that abuse has been buried, because she has never received proper trauma-informed treatment, she has not been successful in her efforts in recovery, because that portion that has been ignored, that has been swept under the rug, would keep rearing up its ugly head. And that's why I felt she was not given a fair chance to succeed. That's why I kept working with Adina over many, many objections and many no's and many, can I just settle this case, in order to buy her as much time in treatment as we could so that eventually it would work.
Wow.
And that brings me to a question that I've been wanting to ask you, Adina, for a while. When you and I talked before we started to record, and we've spent quite a few hours just chatting with one another, you've helped me shatter a lot of myths and misconceptions that folks have. And oftentimes for me as a lawyer in the legal system, I see that folks have this belief that somehow treatment is a cop-out, that treatment is just an excuse for behavior, and that when people say, oh, I just want to go to a program, it's just an excuse to get out, and that we shouldn't give people these opportunities, or we should be really strict with these opportunities. But from talking to you, it seemed like that really wasn't the case, because jail was much easier for you.
Definitely. I do have to say that that's my personal case. I do think that some people really ruin it for everybody else, because they do request a program over and over again, and then they will leave the program, the day they get there. I was one of those people, but I think that it's so important for, the one person that actually goes there and stays there and changes their life. So I think that's really important. For me personally, yeah, jail was much easier for me than treatment, because I can adapt, to different environments, and there's always, every once in a while, you can get drugs in jail, and in treatment there's none of that. And also, I had been to so many treatment centers. They all say that, all the groups and the classes say the same things over and over again. I felt as though it was completely pointless for me to be in treatment, and I would have rather to stay in jail over going to treatment until this last time, when I was just absolutely spent and done and ready to change my life. But a lot of people look at it that way. A lot of people would much rather stay in jail because you don't have to look into yourself. And then also you go to treatment, like in the outside world, you go to treatment. You've just come off the streets. You literally have nothing. You have nothing to your name. You don't have a phone. You don't have clothing. You don't have a car. You don't have a home. Everybody has forgotten about you or given up on you. And now you're sober and you have to live with all those feelings and somehow trust the process that eventually, as you stay sober for longer, you're going to get, the material things back. And a lot of people just, that initial suffering and pain is just too much for them.
Especially, I think, Adina, by the time folks really accept that they need the help, I feel like so many bridges are burned, so many connections are severed, so many friends are no longer your friends, no longer answer your phone calls. Some of them might be dead. How does that factor in to what a person is experiencing when, after telling everybody that you're going to change, you just need some help, you need some money, whatever, for 5, 10, 15 years, suddenly, how do you convince people this time I'm for real?
It's horrific because nobody believes you in the beginning. And you're so ashamed and disappointed with yourself and all those feelings I was talking about before. And yes, a lot of people, I have lost a lot of friends to addiction. A lot of people, I lost both my grandmothers while I was in jail, at different times. I missed funerals, I missed weddings, I missed everything. And life continues without you. I think that the unbelievable shame of it all is what makes it so difficult for people and ultimately leads very much to relapse. Some people are lucky enough to, have family that still believes in them and rides with them. And that was my case. But while I was in active addiction, it upset me. I wanted them to just leave me alone because it hurt me so much to hurt them. And so I wanted everybody to just pretty much behave as though I was dead. But it's very much a blessing to have people in my life who have believed in me through the darkest times.
And Adina, this may not have been your experience per se, but a lot of times when I have clients who are so badly addicted, as you mentioned in our previous meeting, there's nothing that a fentanyl addict or a drug addict will not stop at in order to get the means to procure the drugs for psychological reasons, physiological reasons. Withdrawals are horrible. Addiction is very, very strong. And so oftentimes we have people who have hurt their family members directly, stolen from the family, taken, family heirlooms and sold them, allowed people to burglarize family homes, steal family property. It's really horrific. And so after you've done things like that, how do you reconnect with your loved ones and convince them that you have changed?
I will say that is definitely a very common story. I think that if I had been living in the same state as my parents during the darkest days of my addiction, I can't honestly say that I wouldn't have stole or done something, because I did many, many things that go against my moral compass in order to sustain my addiction. I think that honestly, a lot of times that initial connection is established when you get arrested, as unfortunate as that is. And most people's families are relieved when they're in jail because at least they know that they're safe. They don't realize that sometimes jail is not a safe place at all. For me, I know that's the first time in years that I started writing my family and calling my family and just basically showing them that like I'm a normal human again. And it made them so happy. It makes it harder for you to let people down when you've tried so hard to connect and they've believed in you. And it's like, it hurts so much worse to be doing well and then crash and burn, as opposed to just you're on this baseline of just a complete disaster. That was the case for me in the beginning. My treatment journey was that my family had a lot to do with it. It had a lot to do with me moving to the East Coast. And I'm very glad that I did that in the end.
And, one of the things that I've always sort of imagined, at least in my mind, is that when you were unhealthy, when you were unwell, you almost had like this, Because I think in your heart, Adina, you are a very family-centric person. And I think family means a lot to you and you love your family very much. So to me, it almost seemed like in the beginning of this, or for most of this journey, when you were not well, when you were sick, when you were badly addicted, when you were struggling, you wanted to distance yourself from your family to be as far away from them so that whoever you hurt by your behavior, perhaps directly as opposed to indirectly, at least you are as far away from your loved ones. But then at the end of it, it seemed like as you began to heal, that brought you back home.
I absolutely agree. I did keep myself at a very significant distance. As you very well know, the first time that you got me bail and I left a treatment center the day I got there, I did not speak with my family for the entire 9 months until I got arrested. The bounty hunters came and got me. But that entire time, I did not speak to anybody because I was so deeply pained and ashamed of what I had done. And I knew how much pain I had caused them and that they were so excited that I was going to treatment, and they bailed me out and I disappeared. And so I ended up, it really did do that for me. It brought me closer to them. And ultimately, that really is what influenced my decision to go back to the East Coast. Additionally, I knew that I did not have the same associations and connections on the East Coast as I did in California.
Now, one of the things that makes it hard for me, for many of my colleagues, and maybe you can give me some pointers, maybe you have some suggestions, but the difficulty that I have is that I almost feel like I talk out of both sides of my mouth when it comes to advocating for someone like you, for somebody like many of my clients. In court, everyone sees me arguing and pleading and fighting to get the person a chance, to get them into a program, to get them released. But what folks don't see is what's happening under the surface and all the work that is happening on the telephone with my client who is in jail, during visits when you're in custody, because you and I have had, I can think of probably a dozen phone calls when, we were on the phone for a long time and you just wanted to be done and you had no fight left in you. And you were looking, frankly, at a release from custody was something very close to a credit for time served. And you just wanted to be done. And I kept trying to say, Adina, can you just just give me 2 more weeks. Let me see what I can do. Can you just give me another month? And in the meantime, I was arranging for more therapy sessions for you to get more trauma counseling, hoping that over time those seeds that we plant along the way will grow and help you accept something different. But how do I navigate that when I have such a hard time persuading people to get help and they're so comfortable or resigned to being a failure in jail? What do I do to make it happen for more people?
That's a very good question. And I think it's a question that a lot of people have. It can be applied to anything when it comes to drug addicts and alcoholics. And it's really a sad answer, is that there is absolutely nothing you can say or do to help anyone struggling with addiction until they are ready, until they've made the decision that they are exhausted to a soul level or just completely broken down. You can, provide them with the best options. And I think that also a little bit of fear thrown in there is, it was good. I mean, I definitely was concerned that by the idea of, having to do, 3 years, 8 months in jail. And that definitely, kind of pushed me into making the correct decision. But at the end of the day, I still messed up and went and returned myself back into jail with the thought that I was just going to finish my time. And we actually went to court saying that I was going to do my time and I was not going to do mental health diversion. And I changed my mind the last second in the courtroom. And it was just something in your face, or I don't know. I can't really describe it, but it was just something within me just gave up, and I, okay, maybe I don't know best. Maybe I don't know what's best for me.
But the difficulty is that over a period of time, it's so easy for a lawyer, just like it's so easy for a judge, so easy for a probation officer. When you hear a no, I don't want this anymore, to just be done. Because really, who is going to take 27 no's back to back and continue to work with a person. And if the person is not ready yet to accept treatment, I almost feel like we need to keep trying until every single conceivable human effort is exhausted. And I just didn't feel like we have reached that with you. I'm sorry. I've told you before, you had an extraordinarily stubborn lawyer, you know? But look, I mean, it's very dangerous to say, I think, in some ways, that no addict is ready until they're ready, because we don't know when they're ready. And sometimes our clients don't know when they're ready.
I do think that it still is so important to keep trying, because that moment can be there, and then the person who has heard 27 no's before and doesn't give you the opportunity for treatment or whatever, then that moment is gone, and you had a chance to change your life. So I do think that the way that you specifically go about it is very helpful. I also think that you're extremely stubborn. You really pissed me off a lot back then, because I was trying to explain to you that, like, you don't understand. I'm beyond human aid. And I was trying to explain to you, like, I've been to 35 treatment centers. Like, this is not, another treatment center is not going to change it for me. And you wore away at me slowly but surely. And ultimately it turned out very well.
Yeah,
I
I was
think
going to jump in real quick if I could. That's awesome. I'm glad you're stubborn, William. That worked out really well. But one thing about what you said, Adina, that, and I'm going to give an example that's way, way, way tame compared to what you're talking about. But I was a longtime cigarette smoker, and I tried to quit multiple times. And there was a switch in me where I found out, where I finally was like, you know what? I really want to quit this. And the other times that I tried to quit, I really didn't want to quit. I enjoyed it. I liked it. I played in rock bands. Everyone else was smoking. I wanted to too, So I think there is an aspect to having to have that moment where things click in order to make a big change like that. I think maybe that what your point is, William, is that you can reach that click faster with some outside help.
I think 100% a person needs to reach profound inner understanding that I am on a path to nowhere, that this is not going to work out for me. What I'm saying is, I think we can bring that moment by faster, by connecting with human beings, by connecting with our clients, by reaching deeper into their story, by talking about their uncomfortable truth, and helping them see that you did not fail because you are a failure. You were not able to succeed because you were not given the right tools to success. I know you have done this before and didn't work out. I know this is really rough. Trust me, just try this thing. At the end of the day, if you still want to take a plea and this doesn't work, we'll be right here. I'll get you the best plea possible. But can you just do me a favor? Let's try this out. What if I'm right? And you connect with different people differently based on their backgrounds. I always try to find something shared with a person. It was a little bit easier, with Adina in some ways because of her story. But I feel like as humans, there is so much that we all share, regardless of what part of the world you come from. We have more in common than we have apart. That's always been my belief in life. That's why I'm so frustrated seeing the divisions that we have in our country, because I really feel that we have so much more commonality between all of us. And so I try to connect with my clients based on the shared things that we have in common, the things we both love or appreciate or are annoyed by, or whatever the case may be. And I think when you do that, when you reach deeper, when you establish that connection that has been perhaps missing in a person's life, I think it opens additional doors and windows, and you begin to see the light. And so my job is to try and convince a person, let's take a step. Let's not be afraid. I'm right here with you. Let's give it a shot. You don't have much else to lose. And, oftentimes people say, oh, 2 years, this program is so long. How can I be, in a program for 2 years? And you have to have the kind of relationship where you can say, Kevin, what have you been doing the last 7 years of your life, my man? You're complaining about 60-day blackout, not being able to talk to your family. Dude, I have you on a domestic violence case. Do you want me to show you the police report again so we can talk about what you did when you were with your family? Is it perhaps better to fix you so that when you're back with them, you will be the kind of person they need, they depend on, the kind of man that your wife fell in love with, stuff like that. So I feel like we're missing opportunities to convince people to do the right thing. Unfortunately, as lawyers, we have to do it twice. I have to do it with my client, maybe many, many times sometimes, and then I have to do it in court. And what keeps me up at night, I don't know if you picked up on that or not, what I'm really afraid of, my biggest fear, is I get your hopes up, I get you to agree to do this, and I fail to persuade my judge. I fail to persuade my prosecutor because I feel like I got you excited, I got you committed, I got you ready for nothing. It's happened to me a couple of times when I brought my client to that level, but I just couldn't match it with my audience in court. And that's really painful. Those are the things that I take very close. Those are things that keep me up at night. Those are the things that really gnaw at my conscience because I feel like, did I do more harm than good,
I think that that makes sense to me that you would think that way, but I think that, the majority of times you deliver, and I don't think that you really make any like high promises. You don't like you always, I was always very much aware that there was a possibility that none of whatever we were talking about would get agreed to. And I also think, to the other point about, really needing to want to stop, I also think that when the point where you're no longer willing to accept the consequences of your behavior is also a very good place for growth. Because when I first, when I got sober, I didn't want to be sober. Any drug addict, if they could stay high and have no consequences, they would choose to be high forever. But it's when you are no longer willing to accept the horrific consequences of your actions, and then it grows into this desire to build a life once you start to see that you're actually capable of having one.
And then, of course, a lot of people feel that they just need to talk about the risk of overdose, the fear of death. But in talking to you, it really struck me that you had no fear of dying. You were well aware of the consequences. You've been brought back, from that world multiple times with Narcan, right?
Yes, absolutely. I've been Narcaned more times than I can remember. When you're deep in your addiction, death is, and I can only speak for myself. Some people, I have heard some people say that, they got sober because they knew they were going to die and, all this. But I find in a lot of people and that I have been around is that death is welcome. Like, it's a lot of people will, hope that they don't wake up in the morning, because living is what is miserable and horrific. You're walking around this world, a shell of a human being. And contrary to popular belief, people think that drug addicts, we don't care about who we hurt, and we just destroy everything in our paths. Like, we have to feel all of that and still cannot stop ourselves from continuing to do these behaviors. So death is a welcome respite. Like, it's not something that is scary. It's something that would be like nice if it happened.
So living is scarier than dying.
For sure. Absolutely.
And treatment is harder than jail. And here we go, Kevin, challenging and turning on its head prevailing notions in our criminal justice system, because we literally affect lives, or at least we think we do, lives of thousands of people throughout California, throughout our country, thinking that we're going to scare them straight, thinking that we just need to incarcerate as opposed to provide treatment, not realizing that we're actually playing into what these folks have convinced themselves is their life and what they deserve and their lot in life. And that's what they've adopted to. And that's what's easier. And I think we have to challenge it if we want to make a difference.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, there's no doubt that even just in general society, mental health is becoming more of a thing that we're talking about, and in so many different aspects of life from a young age. And who knows, maybe if mental health was something that was more prevalent, to understanding mental health was more prevalent 20 years ago, maybe a lot of people who went down a similar path to you, Adina, maybe are spared that path somehow.
I think we're on the right track now in California because lawyers for the first time have tools we didn't have previously. Mm-hmm. But the problem we have is that our system suffers from fundamental misallocation of resources. We know that 50 to 75% of all people that go through the doors of a courthouse near you will have mental health or substance abuse issues. but we are consciously allocating only a fraction of the total resources the system has, maybe 5-8% of the resources we have, maybe 1 out of 15, 20 courtrooms. In some jurisdiction, 1 out of 30 courtrooms will be assigned to be a treatment court or a mental health court. Some jurisdictions don't have dedicated mental health courts or treatment courts at all. And I think if you do the same things all over again, you will never get a different result. And that's why we really want to challenge conventional beliefs, applaud the efforts of those of our colleagues who are doing similar work, and also discuss that this type of work is important, it's inspiring, it changes lives, and it also comes at personal, emotional, and professional cost. And that's why we wanted to start this conversation and bring folks into this conversation for everyone to hear. And we hope folks hear what we're saying.
Yeah, for sure. And Adina, you've kind of taken your new lease on life, if you will, and now you're helping other people. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So when the last time that when William got the judge to agree to mental health diversion, I went to treatment in New Jersey, inpatient partial hospitalization for 3 months. After that, I moved to a sober living. I have been here now for almost 2 years. I was a resident and then I became the live-in house manager. And I've done that for about a year now. And now finally I am very soon going to be getting my own place. So, which is a very, very big deal for me, as that's never anything that I've been able to do before. I do work the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I find that it's very, very helpful, in addition to addressing mental health and things like that. And I try to be of service. I try to, use my story to help other people, because I have a lot of the things I've been through can relate to a lot of different people.
And I'm trying to piggyback off of Adina's story to help me and other lawyers understand people like Adina and make us better at doing our job, because I think it's so important. And one of the things that Adina and I talked about that hopefully we'll be able to do is I really wanted to start a project where Adina and I can talk about experiences from our differing perspectives. My perspective as a lawyer, Adina's perspective as a client going through this, or as a person suffering from mental health issues, from substance use issues. So we're hoping to start and kind of co-author a blog that talks about that, and we'll try it out and see if folks want to read it or listen to it. But we're really excited to bring that message forward, because I think at the end of the day, service is something that's very important. Service to others, it's part of our shared, I think, cultural set of values for me and Adina. And I think if we can change other lives, we can change the world, right?
Absolutely.
Not a lofty goal or anything, but I love it still. As we finish up here, I'm curious real quick. So do you believe that this approach, that what William is trying to do, just based on the people that you've talked to since and before, do you think that a collaboration like this can help break that cycle of truly break that cycle of reoffending?
I think that it is a very tall order when you talk about, the cycle of reoffending in the sense that what we just spoke about with the way that addiction works. And as somebody who has been incarcerated, William mentioned 50 to 75%. I can honestly say that in every jail I have been in, I would say 99.8% of the women there were all drug addicts. And the majority of, their crimes were in commission of trying to, obtain drugs.
To get more drugs.
And so I think that, yes, it can definitely affect recidivism in the sense of providing the proper tools and all that for somebody who wants to succeed. I do think, when they're released, I do think also though that, battling addiction is a very, very uphill, battle. And it's also, not to go off into another topic, but it's also very much, the system makes it very, very difficult for people who are coming out of jail to succeed in life without a lot of people end up reoffending just because they can't survive out there. But I do definitely think that it is extremely helpful.
And Adina, you're talking about how 99.8% of women you've met in jail have drug dependency issues or alcohol dependency issues. And I would challenge that probably if you probe deeper underneath and you start talking to these ladies and you ask, how did you first get addicted to drugs? What is causing that addiction? I think we're going to find that a lot of these women, unfortunately, were victims of probably really bad domestic violence, sexual violence, other forms of abuse, maybe lost a child, maybe had a trauma that happened, went through a nasty divorce, breakup, whatever. But I think that we can't just stop at what we see in front of us. I really think it's important to understand why are we seeing what we're seeing. So we're not just treating the problem on the surface level, but we can go beneath the surface and address its roots.
Most drug addicts definitely are what, the treatment term is co-occurring. We all have mental health for the most part. I don't think really you can become a drug addict without having some sort of mental health issue.
Mm-hmm. And I think if the conventional wisdom from our probation officers, from our courts, if all we're identifying is just the drug issue, because maybe nobody wants to talk about that trauma, maybe it's not part of the questionnaire that you get asked, during your pre-sentencing interview or something like that. If no one is asking the hard questions, if no one is volunteering these embarrassing, uniquely personal, responses, then we miss an opportunity to address the whole problem. We address only a portion of the problem, and that's why we don't see such good results.
I agree.
As we wrap things up, how do you move forward after treatment? After you're successful in your treatment, after you make this big change, where do you go from there?
I think that it's the things that everybody else in the world, is accustomed to, like getting a job and paying bills and being a responsible human being, is like the scariest thing in the world for people who are drug addicts and, mental health, things like that. It's absolutely terrifying. And just being in the real world is so terrifying because you don't even know how to interact with people who are not struggling with the same things as you anymore. And so for me, thank God, I started off very, very, simple. I slowly, one foot in front of the other. I started off working part-time, and it was like so painful at first. Like I would just count down the hours because we're not trained, like my mind was not disciplined. But slowly, you start to build something, and then it feels good. And then I wanted to, just keep on going. And I went to school for something that I'm very passionate about, went through all that, went through a lot of things in order to get licensed, dealing with, the system and pulling up my criminal record from other things. And ultimately what the diversion is what really made the difference, because I no longer had that on my record. It was completely, dismissed. And I was able to, I am a licensed professional now, and I lead a pretty simple life. I try to be a good person. I try to be a better person the next day than I was, the day before, and just to do the right thing. Support is important. Yeah. And that's really the way I've navigated it.
And it's so interesting. Once again, I'm struck in our dialogue with you, Adina. I'm just struck at how you and I both, I think, mean really well, but we view things from very different perspectives, and we view it completely differently. While you're going through the day-to-day mechanics of living it, the way I've always answered the same question that you have asked, Kevin, I have people asking me all the time at the end of this, what do I do now? My case is dismissed. My charges have been dismissed. I've completed my probation. I got my record clear. What do I do now? How do I answer these questions? What happens when I apply for a job? And so I always try to tell people, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of your past. Don't hide from your past. Remember, in this country, in America, we love, an underdog. I think this country really is unique in that we accept that some people will have challenges. We root for the underdog in America. We want to see a person succeed. We want a story of somebody struggling, sometimes against overwhelming odds, and then coming on top. And so what I always tell a client who has gone through this journey is that if there is something in your life that has become a point of weakness for you, a point of shame or embarrassment, maybe a case that you had that you were once convicted of, the fact that you were accused of something. You've changed your life. You've gone through treatment. You've achieved sobriety. Your efforts were recognized. Case was dismissed. Don't hide from it. Don't lie about it on job applications. Don't be embarrassed. Talk about it as the moment you chose to take control of your life and make a change. Take your point of weakness and make it a point of personal strength. And when you reclaim your narrative, when you tell other people the unique story and unique challenges that you have faced and overcome, I think that makes you more competitive in life. I think it makes you more successful in life. And I think that's how I want to motivate people who have overcome the kind of challenges that Adina has. And I think, Adina, for you, I've said it to you so many times already, but I think you are a living example of it. I am so excited to see how your life plays out and the story that you will write in this new chapter of your life, because I think you have just started. I think it's going to be an incredible story. I think you have a very compelling personal narrative. You are an unbelievably resilient person. And I think there is a purpose for you in life. I hope that this is a purpose you are now discovering. And I think if you live your life as a life of purpose, service, and meaning for others, building on the experiences you have to help other people, I think you're going to be incredibly successful. And I think your life will have a meaning. But of course, it's also going to have lots and lots of challenges. And those are the moments when I think we need to recognize that part of living is dealing with those challenges. We can't control what we have done in the past. We can't control what happens to us in life, what phone call we're going to have, what life event is going to knock us out, of our state of equilibrium. The only thing we can control is how we respond to it. And so I'm here for you. I plan to be here for you. You're not a client anymore. You are a friend. I think so unbelievably highly of you and of everything you've gone through. And I feel really lucky and really privileged that you catapulted into my life, a long time ago, and made me work very hard and made me better and helped me understand people through our dialogue and conversation so I could hopefully help others.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us on another episode of Counselor Beyond Conventional Defense. Please be sure to like and subscribe to our channel and leave us a review. William, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate you being here. And Adina, thanks so much for sharing that story with us. Very inspiring. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Best of luck to you going forward too.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.